Welcome to another episode of Another Good Decision podcast. Today I'm joined by Tim Trumper, author of AI Game On. Tim, thanks so much for joining me.
It's my great pleasure to be here, Patrick. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Look, I wanted to start off, we're talking a lot about AI at the Governance Institute. It's a big feature of our upcoming Governance and Leadership Forum in September. The first question I had is around AI decision making. Who or what decides when it comes to AI decision making, and what are some ethical and governance concerns?
Yeah, well, thanks for that question. It's the right question. In fact, the subtitle of my book, AI Game On, is How to Decide Who or What Decides. And I actually think that's the governance challenge of our time. In fact, when I walk into boardrooms anywhere around the world, that is actually what they're deciding, is how do we hand off to a machine? What are the rules we would do that with? What are the use cases we are happy to deploy? And what happens if we undercook it, we don't do enough? I think we'll circle back to that with AI. And what happens if we overreach and do too much? Particularly something that creates a second order consequence which might surprise you. So I think that's the question of our time. And what I've been trying to capture in the book is this sense of, you can't know everything about the future. And there's a lot of ambiguity about what's going on. But you can have some philosophies that are helpful. And the one that I quote is actually from Greg, founder of a business I've been involved with for a long time. And Greg has this thing called the AI data Hippocratic Oath. And if you think about the Hippocratic Oath is thousands of years old. And it really says two things. At first, do no harm. And second, keep the patient's information sacrosanct. So if you grab those two things and apply them to your AI strategy, say, do no harm, be sure you're doing no harm, which is, you've got to be sure of that. And then also keep your customer or the other information sacrosanct. If you do those two things as your North Star, the chances of you being the wrong side of this are quite low. So I think that it's a very helpful framework. And what I think is so interesting and timeless about the Hippocratic Oath, the Hippocratic Oath, was written, I think, in Greece a couple of thousand years ago. There was no concept of what nuclear medicine was going to be. And yet it still works for nuclear medicine. So you need to create your frameworks here, which will be ready for the agentic world, which is upon us.
Fantastic. Another question I've had that we've been talking about quite a bit is this notion of agentic AI and how that will affect decision making and also responsibilities on sort of a board and executive level. Do you have any insights into that?
Yeah. Well, it's the most incredible thing. I mean, we're living. This is the slowest pace of change we will ever have again. I'm studying AI really hard, learning a lot, doing different courses around the world, reading lots of books, listening to hundreds of podcasts. And when you put it together in your mind, people are talking about some of these tools we're using are accelerating at rates which are thousands of times Moore's law. So there are people saying, we're going to see models come out that might be 10,000 or 1,000,000 times better than what we see today. The capability of something that is 10,000 times better than what we have today is unimaginable, literally unimaginable. And I'm reminded that, some of the ChatGPT and the other large language models, these things aren't 3 years old yet, and they're already accelerating really fast. So in an agentic world, which is upon us, there's some really interesting examples coming out. Like, have you seen the Visa agentic credit card? It's a credit card which will do your shopping for you, where you can load your Christmas card list, your Christmas present list in, and it will organize them. So it's how to decide who what decides. Your credit card is starting to decide where you shop. So these are incredible times, and a great challenge for governance professionals to keep their head straight about what you need to worry about, how you need to set up your organization for success. But without a doubt, in my mind, the greatest risk here is inaction. The greatest risk will be underuse of the tools. And if you're competing against somebody who's got an agentic credit card and your data is a mess and you can't act, you are really going to be in trouble.
That's really interesting, particularly the notion of the rapid transformation and change associated with AI. I can imagine from a regulatory perspective and capabilities perspective, these things are probably struggling to keep up with the change. So my question is, how can organisations get on the forefront of capabilities, making sure their workforce are up to date, and what capabilities are needed? Is it more human aspects of leadership, or what is it, technical?
Yeah. I think the more things change, the more we need to learn. And that's really why I wrote the book. And I'd encourage everybody to just learn, to read, listen to podcasts. There's a lot of information out there. It's really helpful. And that's the first thing. The second thing is use the tools. You can't govern what you don't know. If you're not if you're not a power user of Claude, ChatGPT, pick your model. If you're not, you are vulnerable to somebody who does, and the capability here is phenomenal, right? So I think learn, use the tools, and stay curious about what's going on. That's table stakes. In fact, I'm old enough to remember, Patrick, when I was reflecting on this before the podcast. So a million years ago, I was in the media world, and I remember when I first got my laptop, and I was so excited about a laptop. And my boss, who was probably at the time, late 50s, 60s, or something like that, he said, "Oh, I'm never going to learn to type." And I remember just thinking, you've just signed your own redundancy package, really, because we're all going to learn to type. We're all going to use these computers. They are never going to be put away again. And this is the same with these AI tools. If you're not using them, you should be really afraid, because people will use them and they'll be better than you. And it's a competitive world. And it's just like get into it or go away, really.
So how does it apply if I'm sitting on a board, or someone's sitting on the board and they need to get across this AI knowledge? How can they do that? And what value as well as opportunities and risks do they need to sort of look out for?
Sure. Well, let's take that question in two parts. So first thing is, these are the easiest things to ever use. Like these tools, if you can think, type, and talk, you're in. That's all you need to be able to do. So they're not hard is the first thing. They're not expensive either. Like there's obviously free versions, but the paid versions aren't particularly expensive for the capability that's there. So that's the first thing. The second thing is back to your question on risk. Well, yeah, you should. I think it's on boards to decide on which tools the organisation is going to adopt, have diligence on those tools, get comfortable with what they do, then set policies about what you can do with the tools, which data is allowed in, which data is allowed out, who has access, blah, blah, blah. Those things are obviously decisions that need to be made. But not enabling the organisation to have these tools is a bit like saying to kids coming, young graduates saying, "Oh, you can't use the internet to find an answer out." It's just they'll look at you and go, "What?" I mean, if you've just done a degree anywhere in Australia, you use these tools. So every graduate coming to an organisation is proficient with the tools. They will expect the organisation to enable the tools. And when organisations say, "Oh, we don't have them, or we're not using them, or we're still working out our policies," I mean, these young people are just scratching their heads saying, "What's wrong?" So I think it's on us as leadership to enable, facilitate, educate ourselves, and get into the future that's waiting for us.
So it sounds like there's almost a little bit of a cultural aspect to that in terms of an organisation being willing and able to adopt the systems and the positive culture around it, and also the policies and frameworks that are needed to also govern it in the organisation.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be feared, because it's back to that Hippocratic Oath. If you get your overarching principles right, there's so much benefit here. There's time saving, there's acceleration of projects, there's discovery of things, particularly, which I wrote about in the book. Your discovery about things around the customer is just so important. And I think it's important for people to remember, well, while we're talking like this, the board of Netflix or some of these global tech giants, they are so advanced with what they're using these capabilities for. They are predicting what colour the shirt should be of the star actor based on real customer data coming back. They're commissioning programs that they know are already going to resonate with this segment of their user base. I make the point in the book, 75% of everything consumed on Netflix comes off the recommendation engine for the individual. That is incredible. And so they're not using the data for any nefarious means. They're not repricing you or gouging you. They are showing you TV shows and movies that you've given evidence to them that you might want to see. So I think there's a lot of really powerful benefits here. Some things need to be controlled and contained for sure, but it's a net phenomenally positive time to be embracing these tools.
Yeah, I did see news the other day. I think it was one of a Netflix show using a large percentage of AI to actually produce the show, which just blew my mind. And I wonder if that's where we're headed with that. Yeah. But I guess, a lot of opportunity, a lot of positives associated. What are some of the risks associated, and more from like the decision-making perspective, do you think?
Well, you can't. Yeah, it's not going to fly to say, the board signed off on this acquisition and set the company insolvent because some large language model recommended it. So people are still responsible. Clearly, organisations, directors are responsible, and you can't delegate that away through a machine. So you're going to own the decision of the machine. So therefore, you've got to be careful about what information you're feeding the machine, and you've got to be diligent that when it makes a recommendation or whatever that is, that you can defend what decision it made and how it made it and the information layers that sit underneath it and those sorts of things. So that's where we are, and that's why I think it's a really interesting time. And to think about the use cases, I think the most, the hard part of this is the material use cases. So what is the material use case for multiple cases for the organisation? And how does the board get comfort that that use case is going to resonate with its customers or stakeholders? In the use case is correct, factual, apply data, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot to think about, but educating, understanding, using the tools, they're all table stakes now. In my world, to be in the governance profession, you just have to be using these tools and know what they are, or you'll be outgunned by somebody who is.
Absolutely. Look, that's really probably all my questions there. Thanks, Tim. I want to know more about your book, and also where can our viewers read it?
Sure. Yeah, the book is available through any of the major bookstores or on Amazon. And I think there's digital versions too. So you can get it anywhere you like. Just Google AI Game On, you'll find it. Perhaps before we go, Patrick, if it's okay, do you want me to share any, I used it as chairing the NRMA, some of these AI tools, and that was, your listeners might find that of interest, if that was worth going to. Well, I just lost you there. You there?
Yes, absolutely. We'd love to hear that.
Yeah, okay. So look, I was chairman of the NRMA. I retired from that role after 10 years or 11 years on the board, 7 years as chair in February this year. But being, an advocate of AI and also, my involvement with Quantium, so I'm very aware of the Claude Anthropic model, and so I built myself a AI tool to chair the board, and it had 2,000 pages of documents in it. All of that content was in the public domain, which I think is a really important point. So I'm not loading salary data into it. I'm using the annual reports, the constitution of the NRMA, and a brief I had written for myself as chair, how I wanted the board to function, what am I worried about, etc. Net sum of information about 2,000 pages. I could use that in board meetings in real time to ask questions. So, and probably I think it's an interesting example. So in December last year, there was a takeover of RACQ in Queensland's insurance business by IAG. And it was announced the morning of our board meeting. So our board, we've got the agenda set, we sit down, and as we are meeting, this deal is announced. Really material to the NRMA. We've got contracts, big relationship with RACQ in the back end, and now this things just happen. The board does what it should do. Well, okay, we've got to find some time to talk about this today. First thing. Second thing is they're going to task the CEO with a work around how do we navigate this? And it's all happening in real time. So I took a photo of the AFR article. I fed it into my Claude board app I'd built and said, if Warren Buffett and Michael Porter were in this room and they could ask 3 questions each of the CEO, what questions would they ask related to this deal and its impact on the NRMA? So bearing in mind, this tool has 2,000 pages of knowledge, 5 annual reports, the Constitution, and my brief. It wrote these 6 questions, phenomenal questions that we hadn't thought to ask. So I read out the questions, and everyone enjoyed the questions. They were thoughtful questions. And then I asked it to draft actions arising as a consequence of the discussion. I made a few notes, and it created this action arising, which I then read out to the room and said, look, this is the AI tool has created this. How do we feel about it? And the net result in the room was we felt really good about it. We thought it was an excellent summary, and we used it. And I think that's just, the governance world is at a threshold moment where you can move quickly now. So those questions were helpful. The action arising summary was done on the spot, and we picked up a lot of time and we added to our conversation. And importantly, the board is still in control. It's a choice we can still make. So I think it's an interesting example of, how to decide who or what decides.
That's really interesting. And as I said at the beginning, that's a huge topic for us at the Governance Institute, is that who decides what decides, and obviously the heart of what your book is. One last question, actually. Do you think Australia is behind on the times when compared to the rest of the world with adopting a lot of these AI trends?
I don't think necessarily we're behind. I think I would frame it more that the tech giants are a long way in front. In fact, it's one of the things in my book. I actually make the point that labour and capital itself is being disrupted. So if you look at the valuation Well, the valuation of ChatGPT was hit 100 billion US dollars when it only had 500 staff. So it's worth more than, I don't know, a huge amount of Australian companies with thousands, hundreds of thousands of staff. So the actual fabric of the economy is changing around data and AI, as you can see being played out. So I don't think Australia is necessarily behind. I just think those tech giants are a long way in front. I think it's an easier way of saying it. And what's risky and what's the real risk for Australian businesses is those companies' capability to reach in and take your customers is growing. So it's whatever business you're in, their capacity to find your future customer need for themselves is growing.
Oh, that's interesting. No, well, look, that's it from me, Tim. I really appreciate your time and dialing in and your insight. And
You're very welcome.
we're also keen to have you.
I'll see you.
Well, that's it. I was going to say we're excited to have you at the Governance Leadership Conference in a few months. So it's going to be great, and we're all looking forward to your insights.
I'm looking forward to talking there and seeing everyone.
All right. Thanks so much, Tim. Appreciate it.
Take care, Patrick. See you, Patrick. Bye.